I just finished an entire album and I'm currently mapping out my plan to release it. Super stoked, but the best part is that I used a system to create it, which means that you can use it as well. In this video, I'm going to break down the entire system and exact steps I used to finish this album so that you can take it and apply it for your own music and finish some epic tunes. Hey yo, it's Alex from Metamind Music. I'm a musician and certified audio engineer here to help you level up your music, grow as an artist, and unlock your creativity. So, 56 minutes of music composed, produced, mixed, and mastered using this crazy system that I call workflow wizardry. You stoked? I'm stoked. Before we dive in, if you want the free template of this entire system with all the stages and all the action items where you can track your music as it moves forward, feel free to grab it with the link below, because in this video, I'm not going to dive super deep into all the details. It would make this video a little bit long. What I'm going to do is share the core concepts, philosophies, the ideas that I've baked into the system so that you can take them and run, and it provides a direct pathway for you to finish your own music. And it streamlines the process. It removes a lot of the friction and just keeps it simple, fun, and easy so you can finish some amazing sounding tunes. A lot of the music creators that I talk to say the same thing, myself included, that they have no problem coming up with ideas, but they do have trouble finishing tracks. And a while ago on my journey, I got my mind totally blown when I realized like how you see the world is literally how you experience the world. So how you perceive your environment, the stories you tell yourself in your head, how you frame situations, right? Mentally is literally your reality, right? And if we go into some esoteric truths, right? All is mind, as they say. And how does this apply to music? Well, to me, in my journey and in the system, like the easiest way that I've found to finish ideas is to be very aware of the mental framing around those ideas as you move them forward. That's why the most important factor to finish music and hit a music goal is your mindset. So it's how you frame your thinking as you move through the creative process, which makes it a lot easier. All right, so let's break down this mindset component. Number one is establishing some sort of vision. In other words, it's knowing what you're doing, right? And it's helpful because it helps frame all future decisions. It creates the context for what good and maybe bad is, because a lot of times context is what will define what is good or bad. And it just gives you some clarity as to what you're trying to accomplish with your music. Okay. And the way that I kind of explore this is with intention, inspiration, and influence. All right. So I'm going to share my screen and show you kind of how like I break this down and what I did when I started my album. So in this vault section over here, I have this inspiration, influences, and intention card, right? But essentially, I take some time to ask myself, like, what's inspiring me right now? Artists, non-musical art, nature, movies, etc. Then you get into your influences, and I take a playlist of the tunes or the artists that are really inspiring me right now, right? The sounds that are pulling my ear, the musical concepts, etc., the genres. And you make a playlist here. And what this does is it starts to tune your ears towards, like, what are those elements? How could I recreate those elements? How could I reimagine those elements? And it starts to frame your thinking as to what you're going to be doing with your music. And then finally, your intention is like, well, what's your goal aside from finishing music? Is like, do you have any other peripheral goals? So for me right now, the goal that I have with this next album that I'll be doing is to really practice my guitar looping, right? And for the sound that I want to go for, it's kind of like guitar progressive math rock meets like sci-dub, right? Like I want to go into slower BPMs, funky textures, trippy synths, etc., but still guitar driven and hopefully using a looper, right? So I'm already clear that I want to practice looping. I want to be using my guitar with a looper as I'm generating ideas, as I'm composing stuff, right? So that already starting to limit the possibilities of what I could use, right? Which is everything under the sun. And I also take some time to go through some sounds, design instruments, which is the first stage of the system, which you'll see inside the template. And I just try to make them as expressive as possible and just, again, intentionally limit my options. Okay. A lot of people might have resistance to this where they think like, yo, the more options I have, the more creative I'll be, more gear, more tools, more plugins, more samples, etc. But there's actually scientific proof that an absence of limitations makes making decisions significantly harder. Okay. So that's kind of something that I'm already counteracting against, where I'm limiting the tools that I'll be using to like rhythm, bass, melody, harmony, maybe something else for fun, my guitar looper, and that's it. And then I'm just going to try and make them as expressive as possible with effects, with whatever things that I can perform in real time, and just narrow the scope of what I'm using to start. Another part of this is that I took some time to go through a lot of my samples and like all these libraries of stuff that I had and really just filter them down into the samples that are, one, actually good, right? That they have good quality sound, that they are towards the musical direction that I want to go. And it's something that excites me. So essentially I took some time to curate a lot of this stuff ahead of time, right? So if I go into my samples, like probably have to organize this better, but I have like snares that I want to use, textures that I found were cool, some melody loops, some cool drum percussion sounds, some bass sounds, etc., some foley, some birds, some trippy ambience, right? Because that's kind of the direction I want to go. And I just took some time to hand pick the samples that I really like so that if ever I need to go look for samples, the amount of things that I have to go through are significantly less. And in that smaller amount of things to look through, I've already filtered them for quality so that every sample that I'm going to be looking through is actually pretty close to something I would like or that a sound that I would enjoy, right? So that's another part of kind of limiting the options that I did before actually starting to make some music, right? And design these instruments. So another part of this method that I leverage is to really leverage quantity. And in the past, I would never think about creativity this way, right? I would just work on ideas. And then once I found a few ideas that I liked, I would continue to try and move them forward. But over time and in testing different things and with some experience, I've really found that leveraging quantity, at least at the ideation stage, is actually super beneficial. And when I say that to people, a lot of people have resistance, right? Where they don't want to sacrifice quality, obviously, right? They're like, why would I focus on quantity instead of quality? I don't want to make bad music. I want to make good music. And that makes sense, right? Logically. But the truth is that over time, like the more ideas that you make, the better ideas you will make. And it might feel counterintuitive, but it is true. And it's actually scientifically proven. In this research study, they actually show that like, when you make more quantity, it leads to more quality, right? They are connected and one and the same. So you can achieve quality through quantity, right? And by doing so, you're just allowing yourself the space to maybe make something that's quote unquote bad. You're kind of pushing your expectations to the side and you're just focused on engaging with the creative act as much as possible. And by doing so, you kind of get that creative engine going where you're going to have fun and you're just going to ideate so many more ideas. Okay. And by doing that, you're going to probably have significantly better ideas than if you didn't, right? So let's say you'd create 50 ideas, right? Or 100 ideas, you go for it. Well, who knows? Maybe idea number 48 or number 17 and 61 are the standout ideas that you would have never achieved if you didn't allow yourself to create a bunch, right? And like sometimes when I ask somebody like what they're doing for their music, and I ask them, how many ideas do you typically make? And it's a very small amount, right? It's like, okay, if you're doing an album, you might have like 10 loops and you're going to try and create 10 tracks out of those 10 loops. In that situation, I would highly encourage that somebody be like, okay, well, before you decide to move those 10 loops forward, why don't you go ahead and focus more on quantity, right? To just allow yourself the space to explore more. And it might actually help you create more ideas for those other loops. You might discover new sounds, new directions you want to go. And who knows, maybe some of the ideas you create later on will be significantly better than the ones you were hoping to move forward without having to had work any harder on them. Okay. Another part of mindset here is understanding how your brain works. And what do I mean by this is like left brain thinking, right brain thinking is a simplified way to look at it. But really what that is divergent thinking and convergent thinking. And in the creative process, like we're either exploring possibilities, which you could see as akin to brainstorming. It's like, yes, and there's no wrong answers. You're exploring, you're checking out, you're experimenting, you're trying to create as many ideas as possible. And then when you're more so in convergent thinking, you're reducing the ideas towards a specific solution to a problem, right? So you could see this as creating and editing, right? And throughout the creative process, that ebbs and flows. But what I found to be super effective and what I've built into the system is to have discrete phases that leverage those types of thinkings through different frames of mind, which sounds crazy, but stick with me. So for example, once you design some expressive instruments, like you've taken some time, you've got some good samples, you're playing your guitar, you got your pedal board, you got effects that you can play in real time, you've mapped it all out. Cool, right? From there, I would encourage you to just 100% focus on divergent thinking, which is only yes. It's like you're creating ideas and there's no wrong answer, and you're not allowed to edit at this point, right? So you're not allowed to try and make it better. You're not allowed to try and make it into something, right? There's no expectation. It's just ideation in its purest form, and you're capturing everything, you're letting it roll, right? And then from there, the next stage forward, which is extract in the system, is that I still encourage that divergent thinking, but now instead of just throwing caution to the wind and just whatever happens, happens, now we can actually think about it, right? You can like, what experiments am I going to try? But still in a divergent focus where you're brainstorming, but you're like, maybe I can apply what's happening in the bass to the melody. Maybe I can take what's happening in the rhythm of the chords, apply it to the drums, right? Maybe I can simplify this drum. Maybe I can double time the drum, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you're using your conscious thinking and logic to actually continue to generate ideas based upon already good ideas. And one of the most common problems that I see most music creators have is when they try to create and edit at the same time. And I've been guilty of that forever. But what that actually does is it almost feels like you're holding the gas and the brake at the same time in a car, right? Like you're expending all this energy, but you're not really feeling like you're making progress because you're continuously switching modes of thinking, right? You're like, I'm going to brainstorm ideas. Oh, but I'm going to make this better and this better and this better and this better and this better. And then, oh, maybe we're going to brainstorm some more ideas and then you make it better, 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 better. And you're going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth really quick. And that's exhausting to your brain. And it's actually, again, scientifically proven that you can't have both these neural networks in your brain activated at the same time. So it can make sense to leverage just one form of thinking, just focus on one thing at a time and leverage a system to track it and to keep you in flow so that, hey, you're not like expending a ton of energy, fine tuning this loop that may not even ever lead to a quality song. Right? And then the final thing that's important about the mindset category that we're talking about here is understanding what are called cognitive biases. Okay. So essentially our brains do all these crazy things to preserve energy over time. Right. And we can see them, peer their head inside the creative process. So for example, a classic one is decision fatigue, right? Like your brain can only make so many decisions in a given day, right? At the end of the day, like if you try to keep making decisions, it's just like diminishing returns. Your brain is mush. You can't think straight. So therefore, it makes sense to kind of piecemeal the decisions you have to make throughout the creative process and bake that in to the way you approach things, right? Another common one is option overwhelm. When you have too many options, it actually makes making a decision significantly harder. There's quite a few cognitive biases that happen in the creative process, and I've done my best to organize solutions or at least ways to approach your music so that you're avoiding a lot of them. So at the end of the day, just having a little bit of metacognition and understanding like how your brain operates throughout the creative process will undoubtedly just make the whole experience so much easier, so much more flowy, right? And less stressful, because stress comes when our brains are overloaded and we're thinking in too many different directions and we're overwhelmed and we're overthinking, and all of that stuff happens in the mind, right? So if we can really understand what causes the mind and our brains to do that, and then create a process that actually navigates a lot of those things so that we're not working against ourselves, it will be super, super helpful. And it's exactly what I've done to finish this album. Now I have a question for you. Have you ever met someone who dreams a lot and talks a nice talk, but rarely takes action towards making it happen? Let's not be like this fictional character. And obviously mindset isn't enough, right? It has to be backed by consistent action. So action is the second part that I want to talk about in this video. And essentially, the first major thing to think about is consistent practice is the key to every skill, period, right? Like whether that's playing an instrument, music theory, composition, arrangement, sound design, editing, production, recording, mixing, mastering, you name it. Like all of those things get built over practice and over time. right? So the most important factor behind building all those skills, right, is taking consistent action. And no, you do not need to know more things before you can make music now, right? You can learn through the process of making music, which will be so much quicker and so much more internalized instead of just overloading your head with a bunch of information, right? So you can learn what skills are missing. You can learn more about what you need to learn through your music, through making music, through even finishing a music project, right? And from the wake of that is like, okay, so that's probably one of the biggest issues is staying consistent. And what I found to work best in staying consistent is to really intentionally think about how to make something simple, fun, and easy, right? Because with music production, like there's a lot to learn. Often in our day-to-day, we're bombarded by thoughts and like content and stimulus, right? So often we're like crazy in our heads. And for me, when I approach music, I kind of want it to be the simple, fun, and easy thing that's like, I'm looking forward to it, right? And that often comes down to the approach and how you're setting it up and how you're framing your thinking around the thing, right? So that leads me into the next point is that in order to maintain some consistency, you're going to want to measure what are called action goals instead of outcome goals. Okay. And what does this mean? Well, when you're in the studio and you're jamming along, if you're trying to finish an EP, if you're trying to make something amazing in the moment and you bring that pressure into the studio, that's because you're kind of measuring your progress based upon the outcome of your session, right? So you're focused on the outcome. You're focused on, am I going to make a hit song? Is it going to sound awesome? Am I going to get stuck or not, etc., right? And focusing on that is actually creates more friction versus just simply measuring the action goal. It's like my only thing that I'm measuring is that I'm showing up for 30 minutes in the studio and I'm doing an extract session. I'm doing a compose session. I'm doing a mix session. And that's what you're measuring. As long as you're doing that and you show up for your sessions and you do it, you're making progress, right? And the outcome of your music will always vary, right? You can't control if one day a song magically comes together and another day you just make a shitty loop that you don't like. That's okay. It's part of the process, but you just don't want to be measuring your progress based upon those outcomes, right? Another quick tip that helps actually stay consistent is deadlines. Okay. So if you've ever had to create a music project for somebody else on a deadline, you've probably experienced that, that deadline helps you take consistent action. It helps you avoid procrastination and it helps you stay focused on what matters, right? To actually get this thing done instead of meandering in details and overthinking, because a lot of the times when we're making our own music, like there's no deadline, right? You could in theory just wait forever. Right? There's no one waiting for it. There's no pressure, right? Unless you set a deadline, right? And a deadline can actually help you do magical things. It can actually lift up your ability to execute beyond what you think is possible just by a simple deadline, or even like a friend that you keep each other accountable and you're like, all right, we're going to release an album in 90 days. Let's do it, right? And you keep each other accountable. Just that alone can increase your consistency like crazy. And then finally, I don't want to go too deep down the rabbit hole because I tend to do that. So, but basically, one of the most important things in taking action, a lot of people will be like, I need to be more disciplined, right? I need to build habits, which are great, right? Don't get me wrong. Like you need to be able to do something, even if you don't feel like doing it. And habits will help you do that because it's like more automatic behavior where, let's say, every day when I get home from work, I'm immediately going to the studio. And if you build that into a habit, right, then it will be automatic and it's going to happen. But in my kind of awareness around everything that is taking action, right, and being consistent, behavior and discipline and habits are pretty much on the bottom ring of what will happen, because it's very tough to break old habits and build new ones just through pure will alone. But there's actually other levers that we can pull that are actually higher up the hierarchy of influence on ourselves. And that would be your identity. And even beyond that, your beliefs, right? And that's getting pretty deep. But essentially, I would ask yourself, like, what beliefs does someone who's going to hit that goal have? Like if you were going to finish 10 tracks in 30 days, like some crazy challenge, or finish an album in 90, right? Anything like that. What kind of beliefs would you need to have if you actually were going to do that, right? Well, first of all, you have to think it's possible. You'd probably have to believe in yourself and be like, I am a good musician. I can do this. Yes, I can learn things. I can learn as I go. I have enough skill to do this thing, etc. So those high level beliefs will actually inform your sense of identity of who you tell yourself you are. And identity is the easiest way to change habits, right? Like instead of just being like, ugh, I got to make music every day, you just tell yourself that you're an artist that makes music every day. So that's some powerful stuff in the clients that I've helped, in myself, and in some of my mentors. Like one of my mentors told me that you will only act to the level of your belief. Right? And really think about it. Like if subconsciously you don't believe something is possible, why on earth would you logically try to do that thing if you don't even believe it's possible? Right? So that's why beliefs kind of are like the hidden matrix code of the lines of our behavior. So that's why I actually have a card in here that helps prompt myself, right? To visualize like what goal, why am I doing this? What do I want to do? What's the purpose? What beliefs do I have about the world, about myself, about music, etc.? What kind of daily music making practice can I do right now, right? What kind of things can I do for my physical health, mental health? All these kind of things will influence your ability to take action. And then setting a goal, all that kind of stuff. So I have this built into the system because it's part of hitting these goals. It's not only about how to take a loop and turn it into an arrangement and how to make a compelling song and how to edit your sounds so that they sound cool, and sound design and mixing and mastering. That's totally part of it and it's super crucial. But the other part of it is like, okay, like you need to be able to take consistent action and you need to maybe understand how your brain works a little bit so that you're not working against yourself the whole time. Now that's fantastic. Well, that is still not enough because you could be doing that and focusing on the complete wrong things that won't get you the result that you're after, right? So that's why having the right things, so the practical and tangible steps that will actually get you there, are so important. All right, so enter a system. So making music and the creative process isn't as simple as 1 + 1 = 2. There's a lot that we can't control, and everybody has different tastes, tools, time, talent. That's a lot of T's, bro. All right. And that's where the power of a system comes in, right? It's like an interconnecting network of processes that can be shaped to fit where you're at right now, your goals, your skill level, and make the music that you want to make. Okay. So a system allows you to execute all this stuff, generate ideas, draft rough compositions, edit your best compositions, mix, master, etc. Okay. And it keeps all of the action items and provides the structure in which to approach them so that you don't have to worry about overloading your head about what has to be done. You just got to focus on showing up, keeping a good headspace, and just executing on these steps over time. So if I go back into the template here, right? Like once I get into the stages of the system where I'm calibrating instruments, right? Maybe I'm designing a rhythm instrument that I want to make expressive and play on my push or a hand drum or my electric kit, whatever it may be. I have all of the action steps to do so built into this template, right? So I don't have to worry about, well, what do I do or remember in these steps? It's all there. Right? Same for once I've designed all these instruments and I'm ready to move forward and jam bunch of ideas out, right? Built into this template. Again, I have all of the steps for flow, right? Mapped out for me so that when I'm ready to just do this type of session, I just pop this open and I run through this list, right? So it removes a lot of the cognitive load that usually comes up when someone's thinking about, oh, what do I have to do? What's the next step? And it keeps you organized, right? Then once I start to have a bunch of ideas, they start to populate here. So as you can see, for this next album cycle, I'm already ahead of the game because I probably have, I don't know, like 15, 20 ideas here that have already passed my quality meter, right? So I've jammed out a bunch, probably like 50, 80 ideas. And these are the best ones that I'm going to continue to experiment with and potentially move forward. And all of the action items for how to move it forward, again, live in this card. So when I'm ready to work on that idea, I open it up and just open up Ableton and go for it, right? So that's the power of a system here, is that as you're doing all this work and you're moving projects forward and you're developing ideas and you're starting to compose songs and edit songs and mix them, it's all tracked here so that it's like a second brain. I don't have to worry about remembering all of that stuff. All I have to do is open it up, right? Open up my calendar and be like, okay, what day is it? Tuesday? We're going to work on this guy tonight. Cool. There you go. And then I just open this and all the information for what I have to do, all my notes about the song live in here, etc. Another advantage of using a system like this is that it helps you maintain objectivity. Okay. So what I mean by objectivity is that, like, if you're making a loop and you've listened to it 100 times, sorry, but you lose objectivity on what that is, right? You might think that it's worse than it is, or you might think that it's better than it is. But the key is that your objectivity goes down over time the more you listen to something, right? So by leveraging a system and going with quantity, right, going a little bit wider with your ideation, it allows you to keep a little bit of an arm's length away from all your ideas, so that when you recycle to them and revisit them, they're still a little fresh, right? You might actually surprise yourself, be like, I don't even remember making this at all, and I totally love it. And it can be very tough to do this if you're doing all these stages alone. Like, often if you're in a band or if you're collaborating with an artist, you have a second head to bounce ideas off of, and they can give you their experience and their perspective on what you're working on. But we don't really have that luxury. So that's why I leverage a system to help me do that, so I can try to maintain a little bit more objectivity. And again, this type of system helps you with all your creative decision making. So what direction you want to go, what kind of music ideas you like, what compositions are better than others, or like maybe when you make a discovery in one type of composition, it might apply to another, right? All of this like cross-pollination happens by virtue of a system like this. Another thing I want to mention is this cool concept called emergence. So a lot of people I talk to, they often say, I just want to create the music that I have in my head. Like, I want to be able to recreate what I'm hearing inside the DAW, which is a very good skill to have, right? Like, if you hear a chord progression, it's very handy to be able to identify that and maybe play it on an instrument. If you hear a really cool texture, sample, or sound design in a track, it can be really cool to have a pathway in your mind to get there, right? So I'm not discounting that. However, I think that one thing that's just as important, if not more important than creating what's in your head, is discovering the music. Right? So by participating in a process and tracking all of your progress in your music, etc., oftentimes you'll find that you discover things that are really cool, right? You discover a cool idea, you discover a unique sound, right? Over time. And that's like an emergent phenomena. Like, it didn't happen in your head. It happened through your participation in a process. Right? And I think that's super important to keep in mind before doing a project like this. For example, I have an idea of where I want to go. It's like trippy, psychedelic, guitar focused, side dub, maybe experimental, right? All that kind of stuff. And that's the direction I kind of want to go. But I'm totally open to something else emerging and seeing that as potential, right? So you can't discount the power of discovery instead of solely creating what might be in your head. And finally, leveraging a system like this allows for continuous improvement and making it your own over time. So as you continue to leverage a repeatable process, a repeatable system, right, you can actually gain insight about how it's working for you, since it's a repeatable thing. So let's say you go through this, you're like, stage 1 was awesome. That made sense. Stage 2, I flowed out a bunch of ideas, but stage 3, I had some difficulty there. And in understanding that, you can pinpoint the specific skills that you might be missing, or the specific concepts that you don't quite connect to. And in doing so, then you get clarity as to where your biggest breakthrough, the biggest leverage point to focus on is. And once you got this system rolling and you understand it, you've used it, you finish some music, great, everything's working. From there, you can build on top of it and start developing your own artistic IP around the stages to really make it your own. And again, continuous improvement. Make your calibration sessions even better, design better instruments, be better able to improvise and jam on the fly, enhance your understanding of music theory and the music theory concepts that tie to the sounds that you like as an artist or that inspire you right now, your own composition techniques, etc., etc., etc. And that type of thinking is exactly why I've built in this weekly cycle, right? Which is essentially a weekly review in which I reflect over how whatever I've done in the previous week has gone. So if I did some calibration and I designed some instruments and I floated out some ideas, I'll just take some time to reflect on how that went. Maybe it went super well and one of the techniques I used just totally clicked with me immediately. Then I'm going to make note of that, right? Be like, hey, that technique worked really well for me. Or maybe it didn't work so well. Maybe the flow sessions didn't go well this week. And then from there, I can start to brainstorm on, well, why didn't it work for me, right? And getting to this level of refinement and reflection and reviewing is absolutely, without a doubt, the most impactful thing that I've found in leveraging a system like this, because you start to really identify the problems that are the bottlenecks and you understand the things that are massive breakthroughs, right? Like when I compose a song with these techniques, it clicks really well and you start to design your own way of doing things. When you flow with these instruments or with this kind of constraint, that you actually create so many better ideas. And you can't get that type of insight through tutorials, right? You can't get that kind of insight through a course or whatever, because it comes from you and it comes from your direct experience in the music. All right, so I've got some super exciting news coming up in the next week. If you're interested in learning this system that I've demonstrated to you a little bit, so you can finish amazing sounding tunes that you're stoked about, be sure to hit subscribe and hit that notification bell so that you can be in the loop for the next week, as I'm going to be sharing a ton of crazy awesome stuff around this system. I also invite you to join the free school community with the link below and join the community of amazing other artists, musicians, producers, engineers, you name it. I'm always in there sharing tips, insights around the system, around the creative process, around what it means to be an artist, music tips, you name it. So I would love to see you in there, and you'll be in the loop as to what's happening next week, in the next couple of weeks. So I'm super stoked to share all this amazing stuff that I got planned for you in the next couple of weeks. So with that said, I will see you in that next video.